Welcome to the Unscripted podcast. My name's Corby LaCroix, and the song you're hearing right now is called Great and Mighty One, available on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your music. But for now, here's your host and my friend, Aaron Conrad.
Great Redeemer, God of grace.
All right, everybody, welcome back to Unscripted from my studios in Old Hilliard with a new sponsor, which will be coming very soon. I'm really excited. This is going to be fascinating. I just can't wait to get in this conversation. Tim, why don't you introduce yourself and we'll go from there.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me, Aaron. I'm glad to be on Unscripted because I am an unscripted kind of guy. And
that's what we do.
Yes. Patterns of Evidence has been a journey for me. I'm a filmmaker. I've got a company called Thinking Man Films, and I started to investigate the stories of the Bible about 20 plus years ago, and led me on this long journey. It took me 12 years to make the very first Patterns of Evidence film, and that film was called The Exodus, and it's been from there I've continued on to produce other films. So the second one that came out was called The Moses Controversy, which I didn't intend to make. But it was about the writing of the Bible and about these inscriptions. Actually, somebody took Egyptian hieroglyphs and modified them into what became the basis of the alphabet. And there's a connection that I could see about that. So I've been developing this series of films looking for God acting in history and seeing if we could find biblical events in archaeology and in geography and different locations for the last 20 years. And that's what Thinking Man Films is doing as a production company, and that's what Patterns of Evidence is doing as a series of films.
So the great Lee Strobel, I'm sure you're familiar with Lee. Lee was an attorney, and I think he set out to, actually at the time, I believe, of his original thought was he wanted to prove everybody wrong. I think might have even been an atheist. So he wanted to prove Christianity wrong. And in the process actually became a Christian because all he could find was evidence. You are actually looking at the architecture or the history. You're actually getting in there, getting your hands dirty, so to speak. You're seeing the actual places that these things took place. Is that correct? And what have you seen as you've gone along? I assume it's probably only deepened your faith and not the opposite. Is that true?
Right. In the very beginning, when I first started with this, I went to Egypt. And I went to I managed to get to the very location where the early Israelites were to have gone. And to this area, it's called Avaris, and it's underneath where the ancient city of Ramesses was. And there was there's an archaeologist there, Manfred Bitek, and I went to visit him. I surprised him. I mean, it came to his side. It was not easy getting there. And when he told me that, I said, have you found any evidence for the early Israelites, the Hebrews? And he said, so far, not. And so he was telling me that he did not find any evidence. And that in the very first part of this investigation, I've documented it in our films. I came home and it was like a seed of doubt was planted in my heart. And I came home, and I was sitting in an edit suite when this thought came into my mind. Everything that you've believed about the Bible, that your family believes about the Bible, is a lie.
Right.
So I had a crisis of faith, but then, and as I said, I've talked about this multiple times. There's this thought that said, "Stop editing, get up, and go to your office." And I had a library of books on Egyptology and Bible history and archaeology, and people would give them to me and I wouldn't read them. They're thick. They were complicated. They were more like reference books. And I got up and I felt really led to go and pull out this one book. And when I did, I opened it up and there was Manfred Bitek's dig site being talked about by another Egyptologist. And I ended up seeing the evidence that was being interpreted differently. So oftentimes archaeology and history and the world is about interpretation. And once you understood the, interpretation, which I believe was the correct interpretation, then we started to see a pattern of evidence. And that's what this book was about. It was by an Egyptologist, David Rowland. He was saying that there is a pattern of evidence for the Bible. He could see it. And he wasn't even a Christian. He was an agnostic.
Unbelievable. As you've gone through this, I think you said you had a crisis of faith. Has this deepened your faith, or are you still in that process?
No, I really, it's interesting you should ask that question, because I think as a believer, as a person of faith, there are times when you go, and I'm dealing with it. When I make a film, sometimes I'm dealing with the same things that people in the film I'm making are going. But no, I resolved that crisis of faith. But the question now is, as I'm working on this new film, it's called, so I've made a number of films, patterns. We've got Exodus and the Moses Controversy, Red Sea 1, Red Sea 2. I'm in the middle now of Journey to Mount Sinai. And there's two films. The next one's coming out in theaters as a Fathom event on October 17th and 18th. So if you go to patternsofevidence.com, you can get your tickets and see this amazing movie. This is a huge investigation. It's taken us 20 years, myself, to get to this point. This was the film I started out making years and years ago and never got to it. And now, after all these years, it's more than 20 years, we're finally getting to make it. And it's a 2-film package, meaning that the first film's coming out in October. The next one's coming out after the first of the year sometime. And it's searching for the route of the Exodus, and we're looking at 6 different mountains. But the thing that happened during this, if you look at what's happening to the Israelites, is that they are becoming, here they've seen God acting in the plagues. They've experienced walking through a sea that was parted, and yet they get on the other side of the sea, and now they're upset because they're fearful. They don't have any water. They don't have any food. They're like, why did you bring us out here to die?
Right. Isn't that such a lie? I mean, when I read the scriptures, I always shake my head, because it's like, you just said it. Like, come on. I mean, you just witnessed miracle upon miracle upon miracle. And I think we see miracles in our lives, every now and then, you see someone get healed, or we hear stories in our church, right? These people witnessed, and you just said they split the Red Sea in half. Like, if I saw that, I would not question whether or not there's a God. We are left kind of to our own devices today. I mean, there's things that we hope and we believe are miracles, and we witness things, but we didn't see the Red Sea part. So to your point, it's like, when I read it, I get so frustrated with the Israelites, and I wasn't there. I was, in fairness, I'm only taking scripture, but when I read it, I'm like, people, like, what else do you need? He gave you manna at night and all the other manna every morning and fire. Like, it's all right there for you. Yeah. And I get really frustrated with them. So I watch too much TikTok. I mentioned this to you a minute ago. I watch way too much TikTok. And on TikTok, I've seen a few where there's claims of finding chariots at the bottom of the Red Sea. I don't know if that's true or not, because it's TikTok and it's probably not true. But as you've done your research and done things, have you seen or witnessed things like that? And again, not specifically that, maybe, or maybe not, I don't know. But have you witnessed things that you've seen that absolutely identify, yes, that this Exodus took place?
Well, in the very first film, the arrival of the Israelites in Egypt, I'll give you just one example, is there's really strong evidence for the Israelites arriving, just as the Bible says, a small community. And then what's very unique is that there's an Egyptian palace that's in the midst of the Semitic people, and it looks like it's matching the story of Joseph, the narrative of Joseph, and there's a pyramid tomb, and this pyramid tomb is I think the only time in the history of Egypt where a pyramid tomb, they found a non-Egyptian inside it. And the Bible tells us that Joseph, became second in command to Pharaoh because he could interpret these dreams. And what happens is that he is elevated, to this level, goes from being a slave to being a ruler, and he invites his family to live. And this is what we find behind this palace is a cemetery, and it has 12 main graves, and one of them is a pyramid tomb. So it looks like it's fitting the pattern of Joseph and his family coming and his brothers all being buried right there. And then this group grows into a larger community, and eventually they're very prosperous and successful. And then there's something happens to this group of people, and they get put into slavery. So that first film shows all of that. There's even Egyptian documents that talk about the plagues that are matching almost word for word the Bible. That's that first film, the Patterns of Evidence Exodus. The Moses controversy is amazing because it's about the writing then of the scriptures. And guess what? This alphabet shows up in the very locations where the Israelites would have been. Wow. And it then eventually migrates, just like the Israelites, to Israel, from this area to Israel. And so, but it's always earlier, which is what we're seeing, is that the pattern is a little bit earlier than what people think. Not earlier than the Bible, but earlier than what people, scholars that don't necessarily believe the Bible's true, but they say the Exodus that didn't happen had to have happened at a particular time. And when they pin it there, there's no evidence for it. So then you get to the question of, chariots and our films, The Red Sea Miracle. Right. Yeah, we looked for different locations for the sea parting. And we actually, if anyone's interested in seeing that film, they can go to patternsofevidence.com, and we've got these films for sale and digital, and they can watch it or buy a DVD and Blu-ray. But that film in particular actually has divers that go to a location and are searching for the wheels and have testified that they've seen or touched a chariot wheel. Wow. The question is, it's a testimony, and it seems like they're telling the truth. And I actually had one guy take a lie detector test, and he passed it. So,
wow. So unbelievable. And you said, where can we find those again? Because that's patternsofevidence.com. Patternsofevidence.com.
Yeah, you go to our store. It's the Red. Yeah, sorry, Aaron, or the Red Sea Miracle 1 and 2. It's a 2-part. Once again, it's like 4 hours of the investigation.
Wow, unbelievable! It's almost like finding the Titanic. I mean, seriously. But now we're talking about something that's much more eternal and important, I think, to so many people's faith. So, I will ask again, as you've gone through this, has your faith strengthened?
I want to say that it has, but there are times when we go through difficult times, where you're having faith that God is going to be at work, and sometimes we're like, I get tired, to be honest with you. Like, making this film has been a real challenge because it's I've moved into that ministry mode, as it were, where we're dependent upon donors and people to help us. And then we've had, you have setbacks. And I think you're reading about, both faith is the evidence of things unseen and hoped for. So I have to personally spend more time. I can be working in the Bible on this film, but I still need to basically be nourished every day by prayer and reading. And so I think in the long haul, I have no doubts that God exists and that the Bible is true and that these events have happened. And that's what I believe. And I've also started to realize that as the culture is probably reflecting more like it used to be in ancient times, where things are pretty wild, what we see is that our faith has to be strengthened so that we know that we know that we know. And that's why making films that we're making that affirm historically credible events, because the historical credibility is becoming challenged so much, I just recently made a film on the early church called The Seven Churches of Revelation. I helped to get a series made into a film, and you started realizing that the early church was dealing with idolatry of cities, where the Christians were the outsiders, and so it's important for us to know that we know that, and the other part of it is what I'm seeing too is that if you read in Psalm 78 and different Psalms in different parts of the scriptures, it says, "Do not forget what God did by bringing you out of Egypt." And if I go to 78 here, it's basically saying, teach these incredible things that have happened that God has done. Teach them to your children. Tell them to the next generation the mighty things that God has done. And I think that's really a battle right now that we have in our own culture right now. It says, Psalm 78. I'm showing here, verse 2. I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter hidden things from of old, what we have heard and known and what our fathers have told us. So what I learned, Aaron, about this whole thing is that faith is generational. Faith is a legacy. You can have a family legacy of faith, and it's meant to be passed on from generation to generation. And it says, we will not hide them. It says, make sure I say this right. What we have heard and known, what our fathers have told us, we will not hide them from our children, from their children. We will tell the next generation the praiseworthy deeds of the Lord, his power and the wonders he has done. And I'm just realizing that it goes on here, and you'll start to see in that psalm, it starts to talk about the Exodus. He did miracles in the sights of their fathers in the land of Egypt and the region of Zoan. He divided the sea and led them through. He made the waters stand firm like a wall. And you're talking about that. Here we are 3,500 years later talking about the mighty deeds of God, where he made water stand like a wall and people walk through it.
Is there a moment where you were like, this is why I do this every day? You know what I mean? Like, is there something that you saw? Was there a day you were filming? Was there something physically that you saw that said, this is why we're doing this? Like, have you seen confirmations along the way as you've made this film?
I've had unusual things happen.
I imagine. Yeah.
Really unusual things happen. And we just made a movie called The Journey Home, where we captured some of those testimonies. But I'll tell you a couple of them that I haven't told many people. One of them, I was at a college seminary, and I went down there to set up to film an interview, and this young man walks by and he stops. He looks at me, and he goes, "Are you Tim Mahoney?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "You're not gonna." He goes, "You know why I'm here?" He says, "I saw your movie."
Wow.
He says, "I felt God call me. I'm going to go and be an archaeologist." Wow. He says, "I'm here because I saw your movie, and because I felt like God was saying, you need to go, and I'm going to go." He said he was going to now carry on the work to the next part of it.
Wow.
And now that, and what was funny was I should have got his name. Then he walked. I was just getting ready to film this interview, and I said, "Well, thank you very much." And he probably told me his name, and I instantly forgot it after the interview. But that's an example. And one time, I was in Jerusalem, and I had all this equipment, and we were trying to get through. And this one young security official said, "Why are you here?" And because they always question you when you go through the airport. And I explained to him, "Well, I'm making a film." "What are you making a film about?" I said, "I'm making a film about the Bible and the story of the Exodus." And he says, "I need to see this." And I'm in the, when you're getting your luggage, he goes, "You need to show me this footage now." Really? And so I had to basically unpack equipment. I had to get batteries. I had to basically pull it out. And then he looked at it and he says, and I mean, literally, I'm stopping all sorts of people from getting around me because I'm pulling out tapes and showing them. And then he looked at me and said, he says, I want to thank you. This is amazing. I cannot believe that I'm hearing this, that someone who is not from here would do this. He says, thank God that what you're doing. But I had to see it from my own eyes, and so you have these experiences where you realize, and I've had that happen different times where something like that has happened and you realize, oh, this is different now. There's something more going on here. And and Aaron, I have to, there are times like in the last week, I've been discouraged, because of just not having enough, money to release the movie. And it's just trying to catch up with everything. And you get asked, the Israelites went out into the wilderness to meet God, and he called them out there, and they're like, well, what are we going to do for our children? How are we going to feed them? What are we going to do to drink? Because the wilderness is where you went if you were going to die. I mean, it's a dangerous place. And I've been talking about this whole issue of the wilderness and that God sometimes takes us from one place out of that place, and sometimes we can look at it and like be comfortable with the bondage and the slavery because at least we got, a meal and we got water and a place to sleep. And he's saying, no, I'm taking you from there and I'm going to give you a freedom that you didn't know before.
Right.
But what I learned from making this latest film is that some people are happy with being in bondage if they got food and water.
Hey everyone, my name is Cammie Pranel and I'm the Executive Director for My Unscripted. We hope you are enjoying today's interview. My Unscripted is dedicated to helping others find their voice, passion, and follow their dreams. Our team can help create websites, apps, YouTube channels, podcasts, media, and social content. Whatever your passion and vision, we can help. Our good friend Manny Ahome of Samaritan's Feet once said, make sure your dreams and goals are big enough to create room for others to join you. We've created room for you to join us too. Find out more at myunscripted.com. Now let's join Aaron for the second half of today's interview.
We have the benefit, when we read scripture, we have the benefit of knowing how the story ends. To give some credit to those that were in the wilderness, they don't know how the story ended. They were in the wilderness, and we have the benefit of that, which is so wonderful for us as believers. Now, when we read scripture, we have the benefit of seeing how God provided over and over and over and over again. Maybe someday there'll be another Bible that'll show what we're going through today, But at the same time, I think it has to be very interesting as you're walking through this you're in the physical places. So let me ask you, if you don't mind, how hard has it been with COVID and all these other things? Like, I assume you're traveling to these places. Are you stationed there while you're filming? Like, did you come and go? You mentioned traveling. What is it like being a filmmaker going to these places? Is it easy? Is it hard? Has it been difficult? Has it been pretty simple? What's that been like?
Yes to all those. It's been, well, you have to do a lot going into a foreign country with equipment. You have to be very, very, you have to get documentation. You have to have a carnet. You have to register all of your equipment. And that's different than just being a tourist and going somewhere. You have to actually get permission to film in certain places. So you have to work with the country so that you have the right legal documents. And so preparation is an enormous part of, going to a country like that, like Egypt or Israel, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, any of these countries in the Middle East. But it's the same in certain, whenever you take equipment out of this country to go film, you also have to prove that you own the equipment before you come back. Mm-hmm. And so there's that is for anyone who's thinking about going and filming or doing something, that's something you have to be very conscious of. Otherwise, you get in a lot of trouble, and it costs you a lot of money. Wow. And but then are you prepared? There are times when you feel almost if there was a barometric pressure or a spiritual pressure that you, in certain parts of the world, you feel something that's different than when you're in this part of the world. And I think there's a spiritual dynamic in certain places that you can sense and feel. And it's possible that it senses and knows that you're there too. So there's dynamics that are going on. And I don't think that you should go places that you're not supposed to be on multiple levels. And if I say that, you have to go where you have authority to go and where you have permission to go. And sometimes you might have authority but not permission.
Right.
And sometimes you might have permission and not authority.
As a filmmaker, wouldn't it be easier? Hopefully this question comes across okay. Wouldn't it be easier just to go to Hollywood and make movies in a studio somewhere where you don't have to deal with all the things that you just mentioned? Would you know what I mean? But I think that's that's a compliment. I think is the fact that you're taking on a much broader task when it would probably be easier to just show up to Warner Brothers studio every day and make whatever film they're making. And that's no disrespect to whoever that director is, but you're getting on a plane, you're going against a lot of different things, and you're doing it. And I think, in fairness to, you're doing it in the name of something much bigger than whatever film we're talking. Batman. That's just the first name that came to the top of my head. You're doing this for a much bigger cause. Is that true? Like, I think you're taking on a much broader task than the average filmmaker who's probably going to roll up to a studio somewhere and just make a film. And that's no disrespect to how hard they work. I just think you have a lot bigger challenges. Is that fair to say?
Well, it's on, let's say, in a couple of different levels. Let's unpack that idea. One is it's not easy to make a film. A lot of people,
right,
on one side, making films to become a studio filmmaker, it's like being a professional baseball player. It's pretty hard to get there. And a lot of people that do get there are just part of they're like a piece of the puzzle. Whereas it's in some ways it's more fun to be an independent, that you can, make the film. But a lot of the people that are independents never really actually totally make a film either. It's hard, even though that you have low costs in editing equipment now and cameras. It's just the nature of trying to pull something together and make a film and then get it to be successful. That's a whole nother level. So on one side, I think that, and I've been able now, I'm on my, I've been executing or producing about 7 films now. I'm going into 8 and 9, and those films are, they are, I think, if I go back to a verse that I like, my wife gave me, told me about Ephesians 2, chapter 10. It says, for Christ's workmanship, and that God's created us, that there are good works that we're supposed to do. He gave, he had things for us to do. And I had a sense of direction. And I think if you have listeners out there that if they have a sense that they're supposed to be doing something, then my argument for them is, then you better figure it out, because life is short. And you better figure out what it is. It says, we are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. Now, what's interesting is the verse before that says, for it is by grace you have been saved through faith, and this not from yourselves. It is a gift of God, not by works. Right. So being saved is not by works. But I think afterwards, both my wife and I have talked about this. I think there's a level of you're commissioned. There's certain things you're supposed to be doing. And part of it is I think that why we're in sort of a mess that we're in possibly right now is that a lot of people aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. And I don't want to get to the end of my life and stand before God and then have to answer for just being distracted and just having a good time when I was supposed to be doing certain things. And I think what I would say is that, a lot of people think, well, I'm not necessarily sinning, but there's sins of commission and there's sins of omission. And I think we have to be careful of is that if we've got things we're supposed to be doing, then we need to be committed to doing them. And then by faith, head out to do them. So going back to being a filmmaker, it took me, I've got this movie called The Journey Home that just came out, and I tell the backstory of how long it took for me to become a filmmaker. But I'm glad that I didn't quit, because from the time I went to, film school when I was in my, I was 19 years old to 65 and making, movies, it's taken me this ongoing commitment to try to become a filmmaker. And why was I a filmmaker? Because I have a sense that God had something for me to say to the world.
Right.
And I had a dialogue that I was supposed to have.
Right.
And I believe I'm still supposed to have.
So, yeah, I'm speechless like that. I think that was the answer that I think I was interested most in. I have two questions for you. One, there's multiple already, you've mentioned them. There's multiple series out there. And so again, the best place for people to find up to where Journey to Mount Sinai is it patternsofevidence.com? Is that correct?
Yeah, patternsofevidence.com is where you're going to be able to find that. And so yeah, that's the best place to find our films, and they're quite a journey. I mean, it's remarkable. It cost tens of thousands. I mean, 20 plus years of investigative, hundreds and hundreds of trips, millions and millions of dollars of putting, to try to, unpack a lot of this. So.
And the new film is going to be in theaters. You said Fathom Events. It's going to be in theaters next month, correct?
Yep. October 16th and 17th.
16th and 17th.
Let me just double check that. Okay.
That's fine. Welcome to Unscripted.
Yeah.
They can, while you're checking that, where can they buy tickets? At the
they can buy them right now. Yep.
You can
go to our website, and I probably gave it 17th and 18th. Sorry, October 17th and 18th.
It's fine.
That's when it is.
Okay, so October 17th and 18th, that's where we can find a local theater who will have these films, and we can buy tickets there. Is that right?
Yep. If you go to our website, Patterns of Evidence, you can buy theater ticket. You can go. If people that are familiar with it, they go there. They put in their zip code. It tells them what theater is saying. They can buy their tickets. And by the way, I got to tell you about this. Is that we've got this whole new thing. Are you still there?
Absolutely.
Okay, I got to look for where I put you now. Which there you are.
There you are.
I have these tabs open, but I've got something. We've got this Journey to Mount Sinai. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah.
We've got something kind of interesting.
Okay.
It's a scorecard, a Mount Sinai scorecard.
Really? Okay.
And so what's going to happen here, I got a bigger one, is that on this scorecard is we've got the different parts of that you can look at in the investigation. Journey to the mountain, campsites, travel speed, wildernesses, Midian. So this is a way for you to engage in the investigation. And in this scorecard, we also have a map of the mountains that we're going to be looking at. We also have references and biblical references for you to go and read ahead, learn what the campsites are, what the journey is. So when you come here, you're not just like, oh, what is that? What's this or whatever? You're going to be prepped, and then you're going to get to go along. And I want to give you a time to basically score. So you see there's three here. The first film has 3 mountains. The second film has 3 mountains. And you're going to be able to go along interactively and keep, a score of, is this evidence making sense to you? We basically have yes, maybe, and nope.
That's awesome. And where can we find? Is that on the website as well?
Yeah, it's right on the website.
They get that when they buy the tickets?
Yep, you can download it right at the website. You can look at it. That kind of tell you. And if you're in a small group or Bible study, and you want your whole Bible study to go along and bring the scorecard, and then go out to coffee afterwards. And by the way, there's a panel discussion at the end of the film, and we've got a great panel, and we're going to be unpacking some of the big questions like, well, what does it mean for me today, kind of thing.
Right. Unbelievable. Like there's a lot to do here. So please, anybody listening, support the film. And that's the last thing I want to ask you. You've mentioned money a few times. How do you do this? And is there a place where if anyone's listening to this and they want to support you and all the work that you're doing, because there's a ton here. We've already talked about a lot. That's why I wanted to get that granular detail far beyond the film. Is I want people to understand, like, this isn't just, you're not just flying over, making a quick movie and heading home. There's a lot happening here. And so if people want to support you financially, how can they do that? And again, this is unscripted. You didn't ask me to do this. I'm asking for you myself, because I'm curious. How do people support you financially?
Yeah, well, we are a nonprofit now. We have Patterns of Evidence Foundation. And so on that same site, patternsofevidence.com, you can go to there. It says donate. And we're working on usually 3 films all the time. Wow. That show biblical evidence, because one's in research, one's in filming, and the other one's in editing. And so there is a place on the website where you can go to the donate button, and you can participate in that. We also have another thing that I developed called the Historical Faith Society, which is a part of our Patterns of Evidence Foundation. And monthly, if people wanted to just be a part of it monthly and give as little as $16 a month, they could be a member of that. And then we have it's a channel with lots of videos. I keep putting out videos every month on Bible, archaeology, and history, and we've got live events, and we just keep filling that channel up. And that's a practical way to help us, and you get something, for it. And there's other things down the road that we have, but those are the 2 main areas of, people that want to donate for the film, help us make these types of films about the history of the Bible and the credibility.
Awesome. So everything we have discussed from beginning to end is available at the website, and that's patternsofevidence.com. Is that right?
It is, yep. Mm-hmm.
Patternsofevidence.com. This has been fascinating. Hopefully I didn't take you too far off the trail of talking about the film itself. But so ultimately the film is Journey to Patterns of Evidence, Journey to Mount Sinai, and it's out next month. You can get that at patternsofevidence.com. Get your tickets. And please support everything that you're doing. And please support because this is fascinating. And I think it's so important for us to remember. That's why I get excited when I see a TikTok that says they found chariots at the bottom of the Red Sea where Moses crossed. I don't know if it's true or not, but for me as a believer, I think we still want signs and wonders. I can't imagine what you're seeing as you're going through this process. So I'm very fascinated to see the films and see what you're seeing. And thank you this is a ministry. This is a ministry where you're going out and you're sacrificing time. You're sacrificing your money. You're sacrificing a lot of things to go out and do this for us on our behalf. So thank you for that. It really is pretty fascinating. It's amazing.
Well, thank you too, Aaron. I appreciate your, sharing what the need is. And, there's a lot more to be done. I have a vision for, we've already put an outline. I felt like what God was speaking to me was to cast a vision. And so I already know what the next films are, and I actually have some material on it. And so I know where we're going. We're working our way through the Bible. We're showing that God has acted in many cases. He is acting in history, right, and he's revealing himself. And so, we're excited to share those things. And it's great to meet you and to get to know you. And thank you for having us on your program.
The same for you. I'll ask you one last question. We're seeing waters recede everywhere, and they're finding things in the water. I don't know if you're seeing this as well on all of our news channels, but waters are receding because of climate, whatever it might be. I don't know, but things are starting to pop up that they're finding in water that wasn't there before. Does that fascinate you? Are you seeing these same reports? And does that fascinate you? This is completely unrelated, or maybe it is related. I don't know, but are you seeing that? And does that fascinate you as a filmmaker?
Well, I think if you think about time now, we think about time as like, this is us now.
Right.
But, time is time has been going a long time before we got here. And so what happened, I've been fascinated by what happened before the flood. And I've been thinking about the pre-flood earth and what was it? Because the Bible says that as it was in the days of Noah, so will it be, I believe when the Lord is going to come back.
Right.
And so to me, I'm interested in possibly exploring, what would we know about that? And so if the waters are receding, is there something that we would learn about the pre-flood time, And so there's many different things that I think that would cause us to be more serious about our faith. And so to answer the question, I have not heard about about this phenomena, but I am interested in it.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why I called the company Thinking Man Films, because and it says that we're supposed to love the Lord our God with all our heart, with all our soul, and with all our mind. And I do believe that it's really important for us to be thinkers. Right. Because there's so many things that are happening right now where it doesn't make any sense, and it's like people aren't thinking.
Right.
So I think maybe a healthy dose of being a thinker and thinking about what God is telling us and what we're supposed to be doing. I think the other thing that I've learned too is that there's so much that's being given to us in media that's so unhealthy.
Right.
That not to think about those things, but the Bible says to think upon the things that are whatever is good and true and pure. That's where we need to be, because otherwise we're really going to be messed up. Our mind is going to be really messed up, and that's why many people are so discouraged right now, or confused, or just giving up, checking out. And I believe we're supposed to be thinking about the right things and have our focus on the right things. So,
and that was a curveball. I was throwing you fastballs most time, and that was a curveball at the end. So, thank you so much. Thank you for taking time to unpack that. I know I've asked you a lot of questions that were probably out of bounds, but thank you for doing all the work that you're doing. Patternsofevidence.com. And again, the film is out next month. So anyone listening to this, please go get tickets, support everything that you're doing. I have a feeling you're going to walk away fascinated. I can't wait myself to see it and to be just immersed in history a little bit. So thank you. Thank you for the ministry that you have and for taking time to be on today. I really appreciate it.
Well, you're welcome, Aaron. God bless you.
God bless you. Talk soon. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Unscripted podcast. You're sure to like, share, follow, and review on your favorite podcast platforms. Also, make sure to check out my song Great and Mighty One on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you find your music. We'll see you next time on Unscripted with Aaron Conrad.